Deep in the Canadian wilderness lies a place that looks like paradise. But local tribes have avoided it for centuries for a terrifying reason. They call it the Valley of Headless Men. In 1908, the McLeod brothers ignored the warnings and entered searching for gold. Weeks later, police found their campsite intact. Their bodies were found in the snow, but their heads that completely vanished. Is it a lost tribe? A serial killer? Or something worse? Today, discover the horror of the Nahanni Valley. To understand the horror of the Nahanni, we must go back to 1906. The world was still vibrating from the Klondike gold rush. Men were not thinking about danger. They were intoxicated by the dream of unlimited wealth. Willie and Frank McLeod were not naive city boys. They were experienced bushmen. They knew the cold, they knew the wolves, and they knew how to survive. When they loaded their canoe and pushed off into the river, they believed they were the predators, and the land was their prey. They were wrong. As they drifted deeper into the canyon, the atmosphere shifted. Diaries from other explorers describe this specific area as having an oppressive silence. The walls of the canyon are so high that they block out the sun for most of the day, trapping you in a permanent twilight. It is a place where you constantly feel like you are being watched from the tree line. For 2 years, the valley swallowed them completely. No letters, no sightings, just silence. It wasn't until 1908 that a search party stumbled upon their camp, and what they found made no logical sense. This was not a scene of desperation or starvation. The camp was eerily calm. Their sled was there, their expensive tools were organized, and most importantly, the gold they had collected was still there. If this was a robbery by rival prospectors, the thieves had left behind a fortune. If it was a bear attack, the camp would be destroyed, shredded to pieces. But the bodies told a darker story. The brothers were found near the ashes of their fire. One of them was still halfway inside his sleeping bag, suggesting he was killed while asleep. The other brother was found in a position that haunts detectives to this day. His hand was outstretched, reaching for his rifle. But he never made it. Whatever attacked them moved faster than a seasoned hunter could pull a trigger. And the final detail was the most chilling of all. Their heads had not just been mauled or eaten by animals, they were cleanly severed from their bodies. And they were never found. The police wrote "murder" on the file. The locals whispered "curse." But the McLeod brothers were just the beginning. The valley had tasted blood, and it was hungry for more. If the McLeod brothers were an isolated incident, we could dismiss it as a tragic animal attack or a robbery gone wrong. But the valley was not done. The legend of the Headless Valley was about to turn into a statistical impossibility. In 1917, a Swiss prospector named Martin Jorgensen arrived in the canyon. He was a giant of a man, known for his fearlessness. He built a sturdy cabin near the river, well fortified against the elements and predators. He sent letters home saying he had struck gold, hinting that he had found the mother lode that the McLeods died looking for. But when the next supply run arrived at his cabin, they found a scene of total devastation. The cabin had been burned to the ground. Amidst the ashes and charred timber, they found Jorgensen's skeleton. But just like the McLeods nearly a decade earlier, the skull was missing. It wasn't burned, it was simply gone. Once again, the police were baffled. Why decapitate a body before burning the cabin? If it was to hide the identity, it failed, because his gun and personal items were right there. It seemed like a ritual, a message warning others to stay away. And yet, men kept coming, and the heads kept disappearing. In 1945, A miner from Ontario was found in his sleeping bag, head severed. Shortly after, a trapper named John O'Brien was found frozen in the kneeling position, hands seemingly lighting a match, but his head was nowhere to be found. The list of victims grew so long that it defied logic. Yukon Fisher, Phil Powers, Ernest Savard, all experienced men, all found in the same valley, all decapitated. Statistically, bear attacks do not end in surgical decapitation. Wolves scatter bones. They do not remove just the head and leave the rest of the body intact. Fear began to spread through the mining community like a virus. Maps were updated. The area around the Nahanni River was no longer just blank wilderness. It was marked with ominous names like Dead Man Valley and Headless Creek. The psychological toll on the few who survived was immense. Hunters who returned from the valley spoke of hearing strange, rhythmic drumming in the night and seeing hairy, giant footprints that did not belong to a bear. They spoke of the Naha, a fierce tribe that was said to guard the canyon. But the terrifying part was not that the Naha were attacking people. The terrifying part was that the Naha themselves had vanished from the earth without a trace just a few years before the first body appeared. So who, or what, was doing the killing? If the protectors of the valley had vanished, had something else taken their place? Something that collected heads as trophies? So, what is actually happening in the Nahanni Valley? Over the decades, 3 main theories have emerged to explain the headless bodies, and each one is more terrifying than the last. The first is the legend of the Naha. For centuries, the Dene people spoke of a fierce tribe called the Naha, who lived high in the mountains. They were described not as normal men, but as raiders who descended into the lowlands to kill and decapitate their enemies, taking the heads as trophies. The strange part is that the Naha disappeared from history just before the first European prospectors arrived. Did they die out? Or did they simply retreat deeper into the unexplored canyons, watching, waiting, and protecting their gold from intruders? The second theory moves from anthropology to cryptozoology. The injuries found on the bodies, clean decapitation with crushing force, resemble the attack patterns of a prehistoric predator. Some experts have pointed to the Amphision, also known as the bear dog. This was a massive carnivore that supposedly went extinct millions of years ago. However, local sightings of a beast known as the Wahila, a giant white wolf with a head broad enough to crush bone, suggest that perhaps a relic population of these monsters survived in the isolated microclimate of the valley. It would explain why there were no bear tracks. This wasn't a bear. And finally, there is the psychological theory. Some say there is no monster and no lost tribe. They claim the valley itself drives men insane. Geologists have noted that the canyon walls can trap natural gases, and the extreme isolation can induce a state of psychosis known as cabin fever on steroids. Under this influence, paranoia sets in. A brother becomes an enemy. A sleeping partner becomes a threat. In this version of the story, the monsters are the men themselves, driven to murder and mutilation by the maddening silence of the canyon. Today, the Nahanni Valley is a national park and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is celebrated for its breathtaking waterfalls and untouched beauty. You can fly over it. You can even visit, if you stick to the guided paths. But the warnings remain. The park rangers will tell you about the weather and the bears, but the locals will tell you about the silence. They will tell you that since 1908, over 44 people have disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances in that gorge. The gold is likely still there, hidden in the riverbeds, waiting for the next brave soul to try their luck. But before you pack your bags and buy a map, ask yourself one question. Is a fortune in gold worth the price of your head? Because in the Valley of the Headless Men, the only thing guaranteed is that you will not come back the same.